Okay. So, we could choose a particular flexibility while recognizing a certain type of obsolete rigidity, most respectively. So, what do I mean by obsolete rigidity? There's a rigidity within a segment of time that we were accustomed to in some type of environment. That environment function with different laws per a set rigid time frame. And now that the background environment is changing, since the background environment is changing, that rigidity isn't the same in the transitional threshold of the reality shifting. And I hope this started when and it didn't cut off the beginning, right? Um, but since the reality is shifting in such a way, we're not necessarily recognizing that we individually have some type of rigidity, right? So there's an individual rigidity within massive change, right? And that individual rigidity, it's super subjective per energy. That could be a nuance too, right? That might not necessarily be 100%, right? So what am I trying to say here is like is even because people think their tradition is like 100, right? And that might not be the case at all. It's we're feeding some type of rigidity, and as we're feeding some type of rigidity, we're also induced to feed that rigidity in artificial ways. We don't necessarily know that we're feeding the rigidity. We're being encouraged to feed an obsolete rigidity, right? So if we're being encouraged to feed an obsolete rigidity, that's why the shadow chaos, mental wars, and then physical wars happen, because artificially we're induced to think our rigidity is better than a different person's rigidity, right? So it's kind of like it's a subtle psychological rigidity wars that are happening, and that's their own choosing, right? That's their own thing, right? All of these other different proxy wars and all of these different wars, ultimately it's because you're somewhere in your subconscious realm, you're coming from like a soul family pool, and that collective of a spiritual family needs to collectively choose to recognize its rigidity and collectively choose how to change and adapt, while intellectually recognizing the very significant particular transition of this time, right? So like for me to bring it to like, a little more base level is saying okay, I don't know if it's glitching or not. So aside from us recognizing that, there's an eternal spiritual family, and paradoxically there's some type of new spiritual family. What do I mean by new spiritual family? Like we're kind of reinventing ourselves from what was, right? We're reinventing ourselves in a new way. And the biggest paradox is we're connected and we're disconnected, in not a good or a bad way, but we're just naturally disconnected, not good, not bad. It's a certain type of duality, right? We're individualized. So in a not good, not bad, in a physical perspective context, we're disconnected, right? So because we're our own individual, right? So since we're disconnected, that could lead to some type of entropy, right? So there could be entropy per the different artificial inducements based on how you could be in an obsolete rigidity. So within, so that could get the best of all of us, right? Because if we're not adaptable and flexible, then we're gonna miss the shift on what's really available to us in the future, right? In the future that is not created and the future that is created. So for me to break it down like no one else has, that's why I'm the number one, because I'm critically breaking it down how no one has broken it down before, right? and I'm not claiming to be anything. I'm just studying like respectively like even some parts of the Vedas, they could be outdated, right? How could they be outdated? Because they're not critically explaining like certain things of processes of creation, right? And the point of me coming on live here is like I was explaining in the underground, I was explaining a certain video, like because I done a lot of shit in the underground, and I'm saying this for my own energetic record, right? So there's a particular episode I do in the underground how Saturn was created, and I have a humble, modest disagreement with the Vedas of how they say Saturn, Shani, his father was Surya. I disagree with that because I break it down critically in such a way, right? And I'm the person to bring that, and that will pave the future's clarity and critical thinking beyond present modern day scholars. And that's just what it is because I could have critical thinking and deductive reasoning on how that's there's just a particular type of obsoleteness or outdatedness within some Vedas per particular deductive reasoning and per particular critical thinking and critical logical intelligence, right? So I'm coming on live to just to say like there's an underground episode, a fat underground episode, where I actually explain who Shani's father is, who is Saturn's father, and it's not necessarily Surya as it's popularly known, right? I explain it in a past episode, so whoever's like really listening to me and they want to really have a genuine connection, then they'll sign up for my course in the future to really get the best shit ever, and that's just what it is, and y'all could feel it because y'all could feel like the frequency of my critical thinking. It's never been like really released, and once that genuine connection gets made, you will have the best clarity because you'll feel the frequency of the critical thinking, and it will be in some type of agreement where there's a genuine connection and relationship where when you sign up you'll get access to the certain underground episodes somewhere in the future, and you'll see particular outdatedness in Vedas per critical thinking and just other ingredients in critical thinking that they have not been introduced to, right? So it's like so there's this like finessing of like letting go of control too, right? There's a finessing of letting go control, but still having some type of self-control, right? So there's a self-control and there's letting go of control, because if there's too much toxic control, then the project environment, it's not going to be harmonious, right? The project the environment and the it won't process how it should, because everyone needs to have their voice heard, right? If there's a group project, if there's a team project, everybody has to have their voice heard, right? So like a harmony could be made, right? So that's why like I'm like in a humble like fluid way, I'm kind of like, things could take care of themselves, right? So we would like to mentally practice, right? We want to mentally practice. That's the healthy mental hygiene right there. It's like, even though we could say and think and believe like things will take care of themselves, even though they more or less can, we can't get run down by the emotional and the false intellectual claims and cases in the world where we forget that we're bounced out of that ideal. And the ideal is we forget that things can take care of themselves. Things can work themselves out, right? There's a force in nature where things can work themselves out, right? They can take care of themselves. But we forget that, and when we forget that, it could be fatal, right? Because then we're trying to induce some type of artificial control, and if we're trying to induce some type of artificial control, then the collaboration won't come to like some type of fruition, right? So 2 points I'm saying here is like, or maybe 3 points is like there's to connect those 2 points is saying like you know, try to practice like letting go of control. And then once you try to practice to let go of control, then you could maybe then the future project that you want to like kind of really legitimize for like some type of spiritual stability, for some type of spiritual stability to legitimize a genuine project, then you would have to let go and control, and you would have to practice that things they will work themselves out, right? But if we forget that things will work themselves out, it's then we're in like some type of artificial competition mindset game. And if we're in some type of artificial competition mindset game, that's where the cloudiness comes in. That's where the fogginess comes in. And that cloudiness and fogginess, then that's the work we have to do per God's intelligence, God, like spirit. Pure, and when I use the word God, I'm talking about pure energy, right? So I'm being very careful when I use the word God. So when I use the word God, I'm talking about pure energy, and we need pure energy intelligence to for real clean the false illusion that anybody could be caught up in within their past rigidity of just things aren't the way they were, right? Things weren't the way that they weren't the way they were. They aren't the way they were, particularly in the new shift, right? So in the particular new shift, all of that, even some of the Vedas could be outdated. That's one of my main points, right? And in the underground, in the future, whenever the however that fucking comes about, excuse my language, however that comes about, it's me practicing letting go of control, right? So that's the thing. It's like kind of like you have to put the energetic work in, you have to release control, but you still have to have some type of self-control so you could manage whatever you're trying to do, right? So what would so for me to close this video and conclude the video is what would the future project be? It would be to find some type of harmony of clarity. So there's a harmony of clarity. And why is the harmony of clarity important? The harmony of clarity is important because it's the pinnacle essence of actually executing and living up to the rhetoric, right? So the harmony of clarity is living up to the rhetoric beyond all of what the gurus say, right? There has to be some type of sustained God energy of harmony of clarity long term, that's harmonic, so we could actually receive the messages and hopefully express the real messages and not just have some watered down regurgitated messages like I'm going to speak on this situation, but I haven't lived what you've lived, right? Because I hear all these new age messages and there's sprinkles of regurgitation, right? So there's sprinkles of so like there has to be a pure energy intelligence, a God energy that's beyond, the regurgitation respectively. So I'm going to conclude this video. There's an underground video where Saturn Shani, Saturn, he has more than his father isn't just Surya. That's for that was an underground episode, and hopefully that underground episode, it could be harmonized, right, per the right company. So I'm gonna conclude it right there. I'll come back as always. And yeah, it's a mental intellectual balance. Thank you.